Good day, everyone. Welcome to the video. I'm General H. Fofolia, and today we have with us Nirav Sheth, who is the CEO of Institutional Equities. Hello, sir.
Hi.
I have a few questions to be asked. First is the ongoing conflicts between Ukraine and Middle East now. So, how do you see this impacting markets as well as economy?
So, it's a very big humanitarian disaster. Beyond that, unfortunately or fortunately, it doesn't have too much of impact as far as the markets and the economies are concerned. This is a bit surprising, but I would have been far more skeptical about what happened with Russia and Ukraine, because that has a direct impact in terms of supply shocks to oil, commodities, and inflation and stuff like that. But it is amazing how economies have been able to remodel their business plans, and who knew that Europe can completely get over their gas imports from Russia in a short span of about 2 years. So Israel is unfortunately a very localized war. Like I said, it is a humanitarian problem. Beyond that, I don't think that there's anything remotely to worry about that.
Second is recently a World Economic Forum they had published, they came out with a report highlighting that economic downturn as the most commonly cited by G20 business leaders, and it was identified as a top risk in 13 of the G20 countries. How do you see this affecting India?
Well, so there is no doubt that you've come through a period of massive stimulation, and then once in 30-year event where you've seen such a strong increase in bond yields, and therefore as a block, developed economies probably are going to get impacted because of the increase in interest rates, and therefore it will be disinflationary to that extent. But broadly, even within developed economies, if you look at US, that has held up reasonably strong against expectations. Europe obviously has slowed down, but seems to be getting back on foot. Fortunately for India, we never stimulated to an overextent, and therefore we are not paying a price for that. We'll obviously have some slowdown that is happening through the export channel. Beyond that, I think our economy is holding up very, very well. So in a way, you are actually shining out in terms of a large $3.5 trillion economy growing at about 6 or 7% for the next several years. I think is probably an exception now.
Do you see any meaningful economic dimensions to the newly formed Quad alliance that's forming between Australia, Japan, India, US? How will that shape up? How it will benefit India going forward?
See, my sense is these are more of political alignments rather than trying to read too much out of it in terms of how it impacts the economic realignments. So you obviously need to create a force within Asia which keeps China out and which gets democratically elected governments together, and therefore be a powerful force. Whether we like it or not, given some of the steps that China has taken, it is imperative that almost all the nations will want to have a China plus one strategy, which is where I think Quad sits in very well. And we'll see more and more of this in terms of how things are going to evolve. So there is one superpower, which is US. There is one which aspires to be a superpower, which is China. And there are therefore attempts to try and block that. And, there are going to be alignments around this, right? So you will see Russia probably getting more close to China, which was not the case 30, 40 years back. But when I look at economic impact over the next several years, I don't think it will be a very significant event.
Right. So of late, we are seeing a lot of trade negotiations between countries, wherein India is like a big role. So how do you see this 5 to 10 years, how India will shape up here?
Well, I think we should have done this long time back, and I think we've lost out, and unfortunately some of the trade treaties that we went into obviously had a significant impact, especially because we've seen what had happened to auto ancillaries because there were no third party origin rules and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I think at least my sense is we don't know the contours of the negotiations that are going on, but it seems that India seems to be taking a more offensive position in terms of trade negotiations. So I think right now the negotiations are more eye to eye rather than being a slightly more not a very dominant partner in negotiations. But like I said, these things eventually take time, and I believe that with or without trade treaties, I think one of the biggest advantages that India has got is that a China plus one strategy is imperative for the rest of the world, period. There is no walking away from that. And when you have a geopolitical issue in terms of trying to diversify your supply chain, then even the cost economics take a backseat, right? So even if you don't have great ROE, let's say for example, it may not make an economic sense to try and relocate a particular sector in India, but we'll still diversify out because it's a necessity.
You have also indicated bullishness on BFSI sector, but recently RBI has come up with risk weight measures. So how do you see this impacting overall banking industry?
Well, I think this is a very small nudge. We've got about 150 lakh crores of outstanding credit in the country, of which personal loans are about 48 crores, within which what is getting impacted is roughly, I guess about 11 or 12, 13 crores, which is about 6 or 7% of my outstanding book. It doesn't do anything, right? So in a sense that essentially it takes away 30 to 40 bips of incremental capital adequacy from most of the banks. Maybe the lending rates could go up if the banks want to try and protect their ROE. To some extent, there will be some moderation as far as the growth in this unsecured personal book is concerned. So there are things about RBI that I really like, which is RBI now doesn't negatively surprise the market. So if there are any surprises, there will be positive surprises. So this was indicated that there is a discomfort in terms of the growth in unsecured loans and stuff like that. And therefore, this is not completely a shock to the market, which is very good because you're communicating what you want to do well in advance, which allows the market participants to readjust their expectations. At the same time, I think that we need to be slightly more, what is the right word? We need to be slightly more accommodative of the fact that let markets play their own role, right? So, I was just checking the data. You're growing at about the last 4 or 5 years growth is, I guess, about 18 or 20%, which is not excessively high. You don't create policies for tail events. So your bulk of the underwriting, I think, is reasonably well done. There are some fintechs which have misbehaved probably, right? But I think that is market and that is human nature. And therefore to try and, so I am a believer that, let the markets do the job. People will sniff out what is good, what is bad. And then, that is a natural process of evolution. But even in terms of earnings impact, I think, I don't think anyone has downgraded any earnings was speaking of. To that extent, I think after a sharp rally, these are all typical bull market corrections is what I would say.
So from last 4 to 5 years, government has done a lot of government has initiated a lot of stuff in the manufacturing sector with the PLI scheme. So how do you see this evolving in India? So now China is, due to COVID, China has backed out. So how do you see India emerging in this space?
Yeah, I think, we know that it has worked, which is why the template is now being rolled out to more and more sectors, which is right. And this is, this is very much within the guidelines of WTO, so that you are not running foul of any of these, what you would call, anti-competitive practices. Given the fact that you have got a significant disadvantages in terms of where you are in terms of the scale vis-a-vis some of the other guys, you need to try and give some level of subsidy to ensure that, you're trying to create an ecosystem. And I think it's been very well done. So there is no favor to anyone else. The guidelines are very transparent. So I'm saying manufacturing renaissance in India is going to be a very, very powerful theme that is being driven, obviously by PLI. I again come back to the fact that it is China plus one as well, which is giving an equally big push. And the fact that, entrepreneurs are far more confident about their outlook in terms of when they look at both the domestic demand and the opportunities in the export markets.
Last few years, we are seeing auto transitioning happening, BS6 norm as well as it's transitioning to EV as well. So how do you see this evolving going forward? Will this play out in a big way, or
Well, there is absolutely no doubt that electrification is inevitable. What we don't know is the pace of adoption, right? So whether it's going to be 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. But I suspect that if Tesla says that I want to come and manufacture a $24,000 car in India, given the right kind of environment, it tells you that we are at a stage of some sort of vertical takeoff. And technology, once you start going, the cost tends to collapse significantly, and India still continues to be a bottom-heavy market in terms of the price points. To that extent, you need someone who can try and have a very, very viable electric model at about 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs. Once you hit this price point, the total cost of ownership falls dramatically and the markets just take off. Maybe you are 2, 3, 4 years away. I don't know, but you're not too far for sure.
So coming on to earnings season, so IT sector, Q2 results were a bit subdued. So how do you see Q3 FY24 and FY24 playing out? I mean, how it will evolve?
So my sense is that if you take a longer term view and a medium term view, it is imperative that you have a conviction about where the macroeconomy is holding up. I have been very a strong proponent of this, that investing in IT, because it is completely an export driven sector, you need to have comfort in what is happening in other parts of the globe. You've seen a massive rally in the software stocks in the last 2 days, and I'm completely in sync with that. Against all odds, I repeat, against all odds, US is soft landing, right? So, and obviously the positioning of the market participants also has been extremely on the other side. Most of them are underweight. So I suspect that while the outlook in terms of actual earnings evolution over the next 1 or 2 quarters may not be too strong, they should be able to meet the guidance. But when you look at the consensus forecast, which I think is roughly about 6 or 7% CC growth rate for the next fiscal, I think that the market confidence in that will keep on increasing. So suffice to say that we like the sector right now.
Okay. So, we have large cap, small cap, and mid cap as well. So which buckets would you prefer? Is it, out of the three, which is the most preferred buckets now?
Well, it's not that I have got any preference for anything else, but I am completely an outlier if I say that I still believe that there is serious business momentum that is there in small and mid caps. Okay. I don't want to take away the fact that the Nifty valuations are slightly cheaper, and therefore banks, for example, to me stands out very clearly over there. We like two-wheelers and stuff like that. But when you look at mid caps and small caps as a cohort, and if you look deep enough, I believe there are a lot of ideas. Now, in some of the cases, valuations are ahead of the story. In some cases, the story is ahead of the valuations. That aside, if you want to take a 3-5 year perspective, and if you want to bet on business models and entrepreneurs over the next 3, 4, 5 years, I think there are enough opportunities. I for one believe there will be surprise in terms of the business momentum that we will have for a lot of the small and mid caps for next several years.
So on elections, how do you see this elections, spanning out, and how it will impact markets?
Well, it's a significant event, but history tells you that. So, I mean, the only way you can think about is that you can think that, there is a 3 or 4% odds of the incumbent government not coming back, in which the markets can correct 10, 15, 20%. I don't know what that figure is. But then there are 95% odds that it comes back, and therefore the expected value will more or less tell you that you need to be in the market, okay, right? Secondly, if you now look at the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, right, you had emergency, you had bank nationalization, you had 2 scams, you had, completely, government which were like driven by 4 5 parties, and then you had UPA, NDA, BJP. Markets have compounded because the earnings have compounded. I distinctly remember in 2004, after Mr. Vajpayee lost the elections, the markets were down 20%, and that was the time to buy. And you had mother of all bull markets from that point onwards. So these things all impact in the short term. What you need to look at is the earnings trajectory, and then obviously the starting point of the valuation, where you are before you get into elections. I'm very constructive on the markets.
So that was all for today's video. Thank you everyone for joining us. So please do subscribe to our channel, like and share your comments. Thank you.